For years, they've been asking, where's Hunter? And today he was like, hey, I'm here. Let's do this. And the GOP was like, no, see, we just want to do an impeachment of your dad where we talk to you in private. This is going to be what your MAGA relatives talk about over the holidays. So you better get smart on it, and we're here to help. Speaking of calling MAGA bluffs, Jack Smith went straight to the Supreme Court to get this immunity business settled. Finally, we'll talk Ukraine and Israel, Gaza, and we'll finish it off with a piece of actual good political news. Welcome back to the podcast that helps you, the 54% of the country that votes for progress in every election, convince your conservative friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54.
All right, Jason. Well, a lot of activity on the Hill today. The GOP is set today to formalize their impeachment inquiry. GOP Speaker Mike Johnson said, quote, "We're not making a political decision. It's a legal decision." I think an open question is what exactly they're impeaching Joe Biden over. I know that they have a lot of questions for Hunter Biden. And that, is a good segue to the other piece of Big Hill news going on right now, which is they might have a lot of questions for Hunter Biden, but they don't seem to want to ask those in public. Hunter Biden gave a press conference today in which he said, well, let's go to the clip. This is Hunter Biden.
This is at the Capitol, by the way.
At the Capitol.
I'm here today to make sure that the House Committee's illegitimate investigations of my family do not proceed on distortions, manipulated evidence, and lies. And I'm here today to acknowledge that I've made mistakes in my life and wasted opportunities and privileges I was afforded. For that, I'm responsible. For that, I'm accountable. And for that, I'm making amends. But I'm also here today to correct how the MAGA right has portrayed me for their political purposes. I am first and foremost a son, a father, a brother, and a husband from a loving and supportive family. I'm proud to have earned degrees from Georgetown University and Yale Law School. I'm proud of my legal career and business career. I'm proud of my time serving on a dozen different boards of directors. And I'm proud of my efforts to forge global business relationships. For 6 years, MAGA Republicans, including members of the House committees who are in a closed-door session right now, have impugned my character, invaded my privacy, attacked my wife, my children, my family, and my friends. They have ridiculed my struggle with addiction, they have belittled my recovery, and they have tried to dehumanize me, all to embarrass and damage my father, who has devoted his entire public life to service. For 6 years, I have been the target of the unrelenting Trump attack machine, shouting, "Where's Hunter?" Well, here's my answer. I am here.
All right, he's going on the offensive, Jason. Do you think this is smart?
Well, first of all, let's note that he called out both of our alma maters. It's just kind of funny.
Well, I breezed right past that. I mean, we haven't been acquitting ourselves great lately with J.D. Vance and Josh Hawley.
I listened
Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, you can just keep going.
Well, I listened to your conversation on Burn the Boats with Ken Harbaugh, where you were lamenting all the Yale Law School distinguished alums. But yeah, look, what else can he do at this point? I mean, and he's being vulnerable. He's saying, look, I've made a lot of mistakes. And I think it's important to call him out on for the background. What people may or may not remember is that the Oversight Committee, or whoever the hell it is that's trying to do this, they want to depose him in private, right? And we went over this, I think, a week or two ago. The reason that they want to do that is because they want to ask him a bunch of questions, get him on the record about those answers. Then they want to figure out, knowing how he's going to answer those, then they want to bring him back in front of the entire committee with the cameras on, and then they're ready because they know what his answers are going to be. They can phrase their questions differently. They can try and make it seem like he's contradicting himself. They can be more prepared to embarrass him and to use it to embarrass his father. And what he's saying is, look, I'll talk to you, but we're not doing it in private where you can claim I said, this or take snippets out. He's like, let's just do it. Let's have people watch. And so I think by showing up, it's one thing to send letters back and forth and say, hey, look, I'll go and I'll testify publicly, is another thing to, government shutdown episode of West Wing style, just walk over to the Capitol and be like, hey, I'm right here. Why aren't you willing to actually talk? So I do think it's a strong move, even given not having a very strong position to work from.
Yeah. And when you say not strong position to work from, I presume you mean if the Republicans hold him in contempt of Congress, which Democrats have done to various people who failed to show up and some of whom had to, serve jail time for not showing up, he has to show up at that point, doesn't he? I mean, I don't fully understand how Congress works as a judicial body.
Or go to jail.
Yeah. So
or go to jail, I think.
Right. So this is more about the problems of it than the law, I would imagine.
I also say not from a strong position because he is credibly charged with crimes. Right. We shouldn't sugarcoat that. I mean, this is a guy who, as he alludes to, has made mistakes and has had struggles and has run afoul of the law. Now, I don't really think it's of use to get into the comparison game, but the stuff that, Jared Kushner and the stuff that people in the Trump administration have been charged with and the stuff that people in the Trump family have not been charged with, this pales in comparison to a lot of that. But that's the game they want us to play. They want us to compare the two so that they seem the same. And I don't know. It's a sidebar, but when he talks about how it's been 6 years, I feel really bad for the guy. There are a lot of people who have suffered with addiction and who have, gotten into trouble with the law as a result. Hunter Biden didn't kill anybody. Hunter Biden did some things that are wrong and that he will be punished for and should be punished for, with, tax violations and some of the other stuff that he's done. But usually that comes with regular, judicial punishments, regular criminal justice system activity. It doesn't usually come with 6 years of public humiliation and becoming one of the best known people in the country because of who your dad is. Now, I guess people would say that, he tried to trade on that name and this is the result. Well, yeah, I guess that's a fair criticism, but I feel bad for him, but who I feel worse for is Joe Biden. I read an article this week that said that there are sources in the White House who say that, and this makes sense, that Joe Biden feels horrible guilt over this because he feels strongly that had he not become president, that his son would have never been subjected to some of these charges because he wouldn't have been as high profile. But certainly, either way, he wouldn't have been subjected to this sort of public flogging that he's had to go through while trying to beat a substance addiction.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an inevitable trade-off that a lot of people who decide to run for office have to grapple with, which is, how does it affect your family? And, you've written about this before in your books. And, and Diana, I think, talks a lot about this, like in terms of like, what does it mean? It's almost like people should be thanking her. Election night.
No doubt.
And obviously Diana doesn't have anything to answer for in that respect, other than being a very lovely person. But
another just a funny sidebar to that, to like the being a political spouse. We were watching, I won't say which one, but we were watching a documentary, a sports documentary, and Diana is by no means like a stand by your man. I mean, my wife is a feminist, there's no doubt about it. But we were watching this documentary about this sports figure, and it kept cutting back to his wife, and his wife kept saying, we went through this and we went through that, and she's talking about things that her husband did on the field. And at one point, Diana was like, I can't watch this anymore. And I was like, why? And she's like, we didn't do anything. He did these things. And then what was funny was when I realized what her perspective on this was, which was when she said, lady, this ain't politics. And I thought that was so right or wrong. I just thought it was revealing as to her perspective as a political spouse.
Oh my. Well, we'll talk about sports spouses later on when we talk about what happened on Sunday. But let's go to the GOP reaction to all of this. They did some pressers.
This has been, I think, the most transparent political congressional investigation since I've been in Congress for 7 years.
Do you acknowledge that you haven't answered that question and that you found no evidence of wrongdoing or criminal conduct?
We found some very serious evidence that you look at. No. The checks. There's 2 checks to Joe Biden from his brother that the money to give Joe Biden was through influence peddling. One was through the American. You have to question. No. Listen.
Loan repayments that we all saw. We showed you the loan documents.
That is. You don't understand loan documents. I do. Okay. If I wrote you, if you pay me back $240,000 for a loan repayment, I should have a check going to you for $240,000.
Joe Biden's attorneys of inventing
the law firm that represented all the shell companies. That represented all the shell companies.
You think those lawyers have
What do you think? You're defending them. I mean, you're acting as
that's just a very serious crime to
Are you positive that money came from Joe Biden? You've read it? Are you positive?
The same bank account.
Look, we have a lot of questions. Next question.
Are you going forward with contempt?
I'll let you. There's a process.
But Chairman, that was memorialized in emails that you guys leaked from Hunter Biden's laptop.
Thank you.
I would like to have asked Hunter Biden about Mann Act violations, sex trafficking women across state lines.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
The last part.
Yeah, for people who are just joining on audio, that was Marjorie Taylor Greene behind the scenes. So I wouldn't say this press conference was going particularly well before this, but then she just ups the ante and it starts throwing crazy accusations out about sex trafficking. And you could see even Jim Jordan, who actually is alleged to have been part of some sexual, sex crimes himself, allegedly, credibly, allegedly. I don't know what lawyers can have to say. Whatever.
You could say he has been credibly charged with standing by and doing nothing while people were victimized.
Yes. Yeah,
and,
which is a crime.
But he realizes, yes, it is. But and then he realizes, oh, we're going into a different into a different territory here. And she's trying to allege a new cover up, and he just goes, yeah, well, that's all the time we have, because Marjorie Taylor Greene's going to start talking. My favorite part of that is the very beginning when Comer says, well, this is the most transparent political congressional investigation.
Yeah, he's right on both counts. You add those two things together, it's a transparent congressional political investigation we've ever had. It's transparently political. I agree.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think you, Jason, might have pulled this clip, but I think the Republicans were asked what they're hoping to gain from this. I don't know if I've seen this clip, but let's throw this up here because it looks really exciting. Let's see what the goal is here. Like, what are we trying to get out of this investigation?
Representatives, what are you hoping to gain from an impeachment inquiry?
All I can see is Donald J. Trump 2024, baby.
Yep.
All right.
That sounds great.
So we got two fellas walking across the street there. I don't know who the dude is who answered that question. I'm pretty sure the guy walking to his right is Eric Burleson, who's a state representative from Springfield, Missouri, who I have to a congressman from Springfield, Missouri, who I have to constantly be reminded is a congressman because we were in the House together, and he was always a very nice fella. I remember he always used to really compliment. I had a pair of cowboy boots that he really liked, but he's just a real meek, quiet kind of fella who I think is just mixed up in a bad crowd, to be honest, as are a lot of these people. And the guy, I guess it's Troy Nels, Salty says, who answered that question. And I just think this is a reminder that just because people are in Congress doesn't mean that they are different really than your neighbor who spends too much time on Reddit and watches Newsmax. I mean, because that answer is just dumb. I mean, it is dumb politically. It is dumb from a policy perspective to not realize that when you are asked what is the objective of the impeachment inquiry, to answer Trump 2024, baby, like Jim Jordan probably slapped him upside the head and was like, "What are you doing, man? We're trying to pretend we're legit. Don't go saying that stuff out loud." So, it's just a reminder that sometimes people get elected to Congress who are just like all the other idiots.
Well, speaking of Trump 2024, Jack Smith did something very notable this week. He has these 2 cases against Donald Trump, and he made the bold move of going to the Supreme Court. He's asked the Supreme Court to rule on Trump's attempts to have the election subversion charges dismissed based on executive immunity, which is currently before a lower appeals court. And Smith has asked the Supreme Court to rule on that matter of executive immunity and to do so quickly. He said, quote, "The United States recognizes that this is an extraordinary request." That's what he wrote in a petition filed. He said, "But this is an extraordinary case." He asked the judges, he made 2 requests to the judges. First was to consider an issue that they have addressed before, which is whether the Constitution confers absolute immunity on a president against a federal prosecution for crimes he committed while in office. And the second was what was the second question here? Well, okay. The second question was on this. Well, I can't.
Let's deal with the first. It's too hard to keep track of all this stuff.
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. So what's the strategy here, right? It's that, we know what the Trump strategy is. The Trump strategy is to say, you can't bring this case in the first place because I was president. And as Richard Nixon famously said incorrectly, when the president does it, it's not illegal, is essentially like what he's going for here. I'd be curious as to your thinking on the strategy here. Here's what I think it is. If I'm Jack Smith, I look at the reality that I'm pretty likely to get a conviction on at least a part of this. But And I guess to zoom out even further, there's a concept in the law where you can't just appeal anything that's going on in a trial. You can't just say, hey, this decision by the judge, we're going to take this up to a higher court right now. And we're going to pause the trial, or we're going to pause the proceedings until we figure this out. You can't do that with any little thing. But there are certain items where you can do that. And what Jack Smith is saying is this is so essential, so central to this case that we shouldn't wait until we've been through the entire trial. We should get this ruled on now. And he's saying we should get it ruled on at the highest level. Now, the court could punt. They could say, well, this isn't ripe. We're not gonna look at it. But if they do rule on it, here's why I think this is really smart by Jack Smith. What it means is that, okay, think about the scenario as it would play out. I think he's pretty likely, like I said, to get a guilty verdict in some shape, form, or fashion. But by the time that happens, you might be either really close to Trump, either getting elected or facing the voters for election. You might have a case where he's already been elected. There's all sorts of ways it can happen. And you've got a Supreme Court that is, pretty clearly tilted in his favor. And they're aware of how much heat they would take and how much it would hurt the court if at that point they decide to let him off. However, it's very likely they would do it. Is that if that's the situation where it's either he's allowed to be president or he's not, or he's allowed to be on the ballot or not, I think if they're the last refuge for that, I think they likely just go full partisan coup style and just do it. However, at this point, the trial hasn't happened yet. If he can get them to rule on it now, I think they realize that if they rule on it now and don't even allow the trial to happen, basically, because this ruling would knock out a lot of the charges against him, well, then I think they realize that looks too brazenly political, and the stakes for them aren't so high right now. For them, it's like, well, we could just apply the law correctly and then let it play out. But if they apply the law correctly later, then the far right and MAGA will hate them forever. But at this point, it feels procedural. I think it's a very smart move by Jack Smith.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has really no choice, and I've unconfused myself. The second request was just to expedite the legal question that he had, and so
which is why he skipped the DC Circuit, I guess.
Yes, and my best guess is that the Supreme Court. I mean, it's hard to say, but I think my guess is the Supreme Court does yeah, they allow the procedural hurdles to be what kills this, right? So that they allow it to just play out as long as possible, because I think, like you said, they don't want to appear too political one way or the other. If they expedite it, they'll piss off MAGA. If they
And keep in mind, they want Trump to win.
Right.
Most of them. I
sure.
don't think Roberts does. I don't, and there may be one other in there who, like, I think a guy like Gorsuch is like, I got what I needed from Trump. I'd prefer he just go away.
Dude, Gorsuch is very extreme, actually. I think he has this sort of genteel exterior.
Yeah,
Like,
maybe.
he seems like the sort of gray-haired CEO type, but if you actually look at the things he's said and written, he's very kooky. And so, the most moderate of the rest is Kavanaugh, but we all know that he's.
Oh, I was confusing Gorsuch and
emotionally
Kavanaugh. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but he's hard to read because of everything that happened with him. He does seem to have an axe to grind.
Yeah, you're totally right. I meant Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh would like to move on, I think.
We all know Clarence Thomas, right? So Coney Barrett, we don't know a ton about, but she hasn't done anything to surprise us there. Alito, I think, is the most transparently political of all of them. Gorsuch is super kooky. And that leaves us with Kavanaugh, right? Like, and I really can't imagine Kavanaugh sticking his neck out for the people who, quote unquote, had his back throughout all of that kind of stuff. So the numbers don't look good, but I think from Smith's perspective, it's like he's got to, it's almost like when it's like 4th and 2 in the fourth quarter and you've only got 6 minutes left and you're down by 14. You've got to go for it, even though if you don't get those 2 yards, the game is over. You have no other choice here. In this case, I think he has to go for it. My sense is the Supreme Court doesn't expedite it because that would just be, I think, rattling either side of the political cage. Although I do think that's the right thing to do here, because I do think, like, getting swift answers to really important questions in an election year is critical. I think they wait, they let this thing play out and hope that they're not the ones that has to decide this matter eventually. That's my sense.
Well, but that's why I think it's so smart by Smith, right? Because and you're right. I don't think he has a lot of choice, but from a political perspective, right now, if they do it, it is a procedural decision they made. Now, substantive as well, because they will be ruling that he cannot claim immunity, but they'll be doing it before the trial starts, and there'll be so much more to go in the trial that people won't look at it as, like MAGA people won't look at it as, the Supreme Court, unless Trump, talks about it a lot, which he might, but that the Supreme Court is the one that did this to Trump. However, in the likelihood that Trump gets convicted and then they're faced with the question, then there's a lot more spotlight on it. And then if they want to make the correct legal decision, which is to say, no, you can't claim immunity from these kinds of crimes, then they look like they're making a choice between convicting or acquitting Trump, which is kind of what they would be doing at that point.
Right. And I'll read you from the New York Times article on this. It says, what happens if the trial is delayed? So meaning the Supreme Court doesn't expedite this question. It says a significant delay could push the trial into the summer or fall, the heart of the 2024 campaign season. That could cause problems for Mr. Trump because he would be obliged to attend the trial in Washington every weekday for 2 or 3 months when he could be holding rallies or meeting voters. Mr. Trump would likely respond to such a situation by bringing his campaign to the steps of the federal courthouse, and they go on basically talking about Trump being Trump, using this to his advantage. This would be a true mess, I'd have to say. And also, like, even if it does result in a conviction, what does a conviction do that close to the election? Like, there's obviously no precedent for this.
I saw a poll the other day that I just don't believe, that said that it was something like 1 in 4 Trump voters say that if he's convicted, they won't vote for him. I would take that with a grain of salt.
Maybe in the primary, like, I could see that in the
I think maybe in the primary.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it means that in reality, 1 in 10 don't show up to vote. But I'd be surprised. I think the truth is by then, you know how this goes now. By then, the concept of a president being convicted, this president, will be so normalized, because you can normalize things now in a couple of weeks, that I just don't think they'll respond to it that way. But, but no matter what, it's certainly not helpful to be sitting in a courtroom charged with major crimes when you want to be out there making the case about why Hunter Biden is really the man pulling the strings, or whatever the hell case they were going to make.
Right. There was a separate news that just went down right before we started recording, that the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a separate charge, which is an obstruction charge related to a January 6th defendant that would also have some bearing on the Trump trial because he's charged under very similar charges, and so this an adverse ruling for the prosecution could complicate some of the charges against him too. And so the way this is written up, and we had to read this really quickly before recording, is that this could also delay Trump's trial. So I mean, this gets to just the high degree of uncertainty around all these cases. I think this is almost like the Finding Nemo approach to justice with Trump, which is we've got to send as many eggs out into the world, and one of them may create a beautiful little fish that can flourish out there in the vast ocean. That's kind of how we treat this, well, I guess.
I mean, that's one way to think of it. The other way to think of it is this dude did lots of crimes.
Yes.
And so I don't think it's, I would disagree. I don't think it's like, let's see if any of these crimes are things he actually committed. It's like, well, he was very busy and he committed a lot of crimes. I guess we'll just charge as many of them as we can.
Yeah.
Which is, generally how
positive
crimes are charged. Yeah.
Positive thinking here. Well, okay. This is I guess the end of we didn't do our Trump legal thing with the law and order.
The bum bum bum.
We need to do that. Oh wow.
Oh, there it is.
Wow,
very
so
impressive.
Fast, guys. So fast. All right. Well, before we go for an ad break, I want to announce something for those of you who are longtime listeners. You know about this, Jason. You and I actually recreated Majority 54 because I had been running informally fitness posse for my friends, where we do things like as a group, we track healthy habits and workouts and all that kind of stuff. And we do competitions, both individual and team, and people bond, they become friends, etc. And people have been hounding me to try to expand this program and make it more accessible to a wider audience of people. And for obvious reasons, it just took a while. I wanted to make sure that we didn't kind of expand it to a wider audience until it was truly ready. And now we're ready, and I'm ready. And so people can go to joinsquadra.com, and you could read all about it. It's, our whole ethos is health as a team effort, meaning like whether it's working out or eating right or getting the right kind of sleep or meditating and taking care of your mental health, that doing it alone is so much harder and so much less fun than doing it with a group. So you could join a community of people that help you be better, motivate you, hold you accountable, bring that kind of camaraderie. And essentially, the way I like to think about it is it's almost like a social network that provides stronger, more durable, positive ties amongst its members. And instead of making you less healthy and driving you crazy like social networks that currently exist, this one hopefully makes you a better person. So you can go to joinsquadra.com. We're beta testing this because I am not a known technologist. And so I've been working with some folks to build this out into a true app and everything like that. And so we're going to accept a limited amount of members on a rolling basis. So you can go there, fill out the application, and we'll be reviewing people on a rolling basis. And it starts just in time for your New Year's resolution. So we'll be coming out the gates in January for people who want to get a jump start on their resolutions.
Well, let me just say congratulations on doing this, because I've, been part of all the fitness stuff you've been doing for the last few years. And it's very cool that you're turning it into something that other people can access. And I have to just fully endorse it. And I think people should definitely give it a try because it's worked. I saw my abs for the first time because of the program.
The common thing we hear, from some friends of the pod, like Liz Simon and Kristen Forbinger, is like that they're the healthiest they've ever been at 40. We had a bunch of people turn 40 in the program this year. It's kind of like color wars for your health and wellness is the way I like to think of it. Like we try to get goofy about it. So go to joinsquadra.com, check it out. And even if you don't join, you can go to the bottom of the page and just follow us on Instagram, and we'll hopefully post some great content. With that, we're going to jump to hear from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Zelensky in Washington. And then we're going to talk about Biden versus Netanyahu, and then some positive news on the redistricting front. All of that and more when we come back. Heart healthy energy is so important to keep your energy up, and we could all benefit from heart healthy energy. And one of the best ways to get some, by supporting your blood pressure and circulation. Super Beats Heart Chews are an easy and convenient way to support healthy blood pressure. They're plant-based and stimulant-free, and you get a green boost without the jitters. And you compare this with a healthy lifestyle with the antioxidants in Super Beets, which are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. I take Super Beet chews throughout the day. They're super tasty and they feel amazing. And this is something that's now become a part of my routine. And I take these chews every morning to start the day, and then sometimes throughout the day, depending on what's going on. And this is the #1 doctor, pharmacist, and cardiologist recommended heart chew for cardiovascular health support. And it's blood pressure support that you can trust. Super Beet Heart Chews is also supporting healthy circulation, so you don't have to just rely on them for blood pressure support, but also you can get productive heart healthy energy without the crash. So double your potential with Super Beets Heart Chews. Get a 30-day supply of Super Beets Heart Chews and a free full-size bag of turmeric chews valued at $25 by going to majority54beats.com. That's majority54beats.com, and you can get their exclusive offer. That's majority54beats.com. If you're a long-time listener to this podcast, you know I have been drinking AG1 long before we've partnered with them for this podcast. I drink it every day. It's the first thing I drink in the morning before I go for my walk. And honestly, I don't know what I would do without it. I travel with it. Sometimes I take it multiple times a day if I'm, having a particularly strenuous day, or I'm working out, or I'm just feeling a little run down. And they're a foundational nutrition supplement, and they support your body's universal needs by doing things like enhancing your gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. And since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, and they continuously refine their approach to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. And so I have replaced my multivitamin with AG1, and I love the fact that one scoop includes so much. It includes prebiotics, probiotics, digestive enzymes for gut support, and magnesium, and B vitamins for energy support, and adaptogens to help balance my body's stress levels. They even have vitamin C and zinc to help support your immune health, which is so critical this time of year. And so if you want to take ownership over your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D, 3K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/majority. That's drinkag1.com/majority to check it out. All right, Jason. Well, Zelensky from Ukraine was in Washington yesterday, hat in hand. Let's go to him and Biden in the White House.
Putin is banking on the United States failing to deliver for Ukraine. We must prove him wrong. It's stunning that we've gotten to this point.
The president pointing the finger squarely at Republicans.
The host of a Kremlin-run show literally said, and I quote, "Well done, Republicans. That's good for us." End of quote.
Zelensky with this plea.
In Ukraine, we are fighting for our country and freedom, and also in Europe, we say for our freedom and yours.
I mean, Jason, there was Daily had a really good episode this week, basically recounting what happened in the counteroffensive that Ukraine recently pushed, and essentially came to the conclusion that Ukraine did not accomplish anywhere near its goals in the counteroffensive for a number of reasons. One was that they were spread too thin. The U.S. recommended that they concentrate their forces and take back a smaller amount of territory, and they tried to go for a more devastating knockout blow. Two is that the Russians are using like commercial drone technology in order to like the stuff you'd kind of get in a store, essentially, in order to basically see and thwart any advances, which is just an interesting fact to think about in terms of modern warfare and the leveling of the playing field between people. And then the third is that the Russians have put a bunch of landmines between them and the Ukrainians, which is horrible to think about, because if you think about Southeast Asia and how long it's been that people are still finding landmines there, people still die. I mean, I don't know what the recent story there is, but I know that for a long time that was true. I'm sure that the same was true probably in Afghanistan. And so this is terrible. And he basically, they're running out of ammunition, and they came to Washington to try to pry loose this debate over funding, where surprise, the GOP is holding everything up.
Yeah, I listened to the episode you did on the last debate about Israel, Gaza, the most recent one, but also you talked about Ukraine and went through all this. And it's what's really discouraging about it is that I do agree that they seem to be coming to a bit of a military stalemate, and that they're sort of trading land back and forth over a certain area. Ukraine is on the advance, but it's nowhere near the advance it would be. And it makes sense. I mean, when you have the ability to completely see everything that both sides are doing, and both sides have relatively similar sized elements on the battlefield, and then you add landmines to it, I mean, you really can't have an effective assault without speed and surprise. And it's pretty hard to have speed when there's landmines in the way. And it's pretty hard to have surprise when they can see you all the time. And so it does beg the question of what is the end game here. And I think I would recommend anybody who's interested, go listen to your most recent episode, because you did a great job of getting into the question of where do we go from here? And whereas the Republicans, as you alluded to, are saying, hey, we don't want to keep putting money at this. And now, they're trying to put it in with money for the border. They're trying to, but they obviously don't really want to do anything, because when Schumer offered to let them just have an up or down vote on it, they were like, no, we can't actually agree on our side. And we'd rather just say in 2024 that Joe Biden didn't do anything about the border.
Right. 100%.
So they're just being difficult on purpose. But I think the most important part of this that everybody has to remember, because this is another thing that's going to come up over the holidays with family members, is this is not about Ukraine. People always want to, I mean, it is to some extent, but it's just, for some of us, it is. My wife's family, came here as refugees from Ukraine. So, it's a little, my kids are half Ukrainian. It's a little bit about that for me, but it's not really what it's about when it comes to America's interests, because what people want to do is in fact, yeah, I think we have a Mike Johnson clip that's specifically about this. So let's listen to that, and then I'll come back and give you the counter.
I have asked the White House since the day that I was handed the gavel as Speaker for clarity. We need a clear articulation of the strategy to allow Ukraine to win. And thus far, their responses have been insufficient. They have not provided us the clarity and the detail that we have requested over and over since literally 24 hours after I was handed the gavel as Speaker of the House. And so what the Biden administration seems to be asking for is billions of additional dollars with no appropriate oversight, no clear strategy to win, and none of the answers that I think the American people are owed. I have also made very clear from day one that our first condition on any national security supplemental spending package is about our own national security first. The border is an absolute catastrophe. And this is because of the policies of this White House and this administration.
Yeah, they're claiming that this is their priority, right? But they've been very clear that they don't want to negotiate at all. And even when Schumer put to them, Schumer issued on December 6th a challenge to Republicans, said, write an amendment detailing everything you want, and the Democratic Senate majority would put it up for a straight up vote. When was the last time the Republicans offered that to Democrats on anything when they had power, by the way? And so this is a mess, and the Russian state media isn't even hiding how gleeful they are and how appreciative they are of the Republicans. This is a supercut of Republican state media. And for those of you listening on audio, we're really depriving you of just the kitsch of Russian media. It honestly makes Fox News look like PBS NewsHour. But let's go to this clip.
What's happening in the U.S. is beneficial for us.
Ukraine is losing. Russia is winning. This is it. Their funding and weapons came to an end.
As of now, well done, Republicans. They're standing firm. That's good for us. Even Mitch McConnell, well done, Gramps.
Well done, Gramps.
All right. Well, I was just texting you over here because I want you to read it. I want to test your Russian. So obviously that's a ridiculous clip, but even more frightening was that Putin was at an award ceremony in Moscow and was sipping champagne. And, I think said some startling things. I mean, he is he is confident, to say the least, what's going on. And so for the video audience, we're going to play this. It has subtitles. He's speaking in Russian. But Jason, since we've talked about your Russian skills before, for the audio audience, we'll keep your audio on, and you're going to do your best to try to translate this with the help of subtitles. So actually, this isn't that much of a challenge.
Should I close my eyes?
Close your eyes. Yeah, close your eyes and try to do it. We'll see how fast.
It's been a long time since I tried to speak it. I can. All right.
And do your best Putin impression while you do it. All right, let's go to the clip.
No, I have no idea. You know. Let's see. Okay, I'm opening my eyes. You're gonna get no. This is a fun translation. You're gonna get no accent or anything from me. You're just gonna have to summarize it, Ravi.
Okay. Here's the key part. He says
that was fun. I got. You know this. You know that. Ukraine this. I can't do it that fast. If we're sitting around the dinner table and he's talking about food, I'm totally fluent in that.
It reminds me of, I can't remember in what context you told me this, but that Diana knew somebody who just pretended to know Russian.
Oh yeah.
Once, and then caught him in the lie because she obviously speaks Russian.
There was a time when I was dreaming in the language. It was a decade ago.
The key point is he says Ukraine has no future. Okay. So you have all this crowing going on in Russian state media. Putin is saying Ukraine has no future. This comes as the U.S. has declassified information, the Biden administration, showing that Russia is potentially going to go on the offensive. So this isn't even just about the Ukrainians trying to win back their territory. They could lose more territory if they run out of support and ammunition. This is a real risk here, and one that I think is extremely alarming. And I really wish the Republicans would put their politics down for a second and realize that, hey, like, Democrats are at the table for the border stuff. Biden has said as much himself. I think he proposed $16 billion. I'm sure they can get that number up to whatever the heck they want it to. But like you said, is this really about helping the Ukrainians, or is this about ensuring that Biden has to own chaos at the border for the election?
And then to go back to what I promised a minute ago, what our listeners should say to people when they bring this up as to what this is about, is this is about future generations or even current members of the United States military not fighting and dying in a hot war against Russia. That's what this is about. Putin from the beginning has been really clear what he wants. He wants to bring all of Ukraine back into Russia like it was during the Soviet Union. Putin is all about trying to recreate the Soviet Union. And that's what he wants. That's what he's wanted all along. He sees Ukraine as Russian because he thinks it should be part of Russia. When he thinks of Russia, he thinks of the Soviet Union. And it's not and this point was made really well by, what's his name? Isaac? On your show. Yeah, Isaac Saul made this point really well, which is, it's not a mystery. He's been saying that's what he wants all along. And so if he is successful in this, then he's going to choose another country next. And at some point, he's going to choose a country that we have a defense pact with, like a NATO country, which means it's the same as attacking California from a policy perspective. It means we will be obligated to defend. And 150,000 Russians have been killed in this war? How many tens of thousands of Ukrainians? So what this is about is, yes, it costs money to help Ukraine defend itself. Yes, you can't guarantee that Ukraine is going to be fully victorious in the war. What you can do is you can keep Russia from winning and taking all of Ukraine and then turning to Belarus or turning to, whatever nation is next and saying, now this is ours, turning to Moldova or wherever, and eventually getting to Poland or, wherever they're going to go and say, well, this is ours now too. And when that happens, there's going to be no choice. It's going to be kids who are in the military now. It could be our kids one day who are going to have to fight, and many of them will die in that war. So yes, it is worth the money now to defend, by the way, a democracy that deserves to be defended. It's not an exaggeration to compare this to to compare the Republican position on Ukraine, or at least those Republicans who oppose supporting Ukraine, to appeasement. And saying, Hitler's going to stop at one or two countries. We trust him. I have no qualms about making that comparison.
Yeah, and we had talked about Navalny last week. Navalny's missing now. He may be dead.
Mm-hmm.
Putin does not give an F about what anybody thinks about him.
Yeah, think about that. Putin looked at, okay, the world is paying attention to Gaza and Israel. They're not even paying attention to Ukraine, Russia right now. Now's the time, is I think what he decided, to disappear him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really, what weird, horrible timing, by the way, given that we're just talking about him and then days later he's disappeared. It's really horrible. I'll probably do an episode just on Navalny soon, assuming that this thing stretches out, maybe even if it doesn't. But okay, let's move back to the domestic front. In a bit of political news that's good, I guess. I mean, we could read it in one of two ways.
Actually, I think can we finish with the good news, and can we go to Israel and Gaza first? Just to leave people with the good.
Okay, let's talk about Israel. Two big things happened yesterday in the world of Israeli-American relations. One was that Biden issued some choice words saying that Israel is losing its support over the Gaza war. He also pushed Netanyahu to change the composition of his government and his cabinet, which is, I think, a pretty startling, although I think valid thing to do. Generally speaking, allies don't get involved in each other's internal politics, which is why when Bibi kind of endorsed Romney, basically, that was such a head turner. But I think Biden realizes how weak Netanyahu is and realizes how much of an impediment to anything meaningful and positive happening at this point in this conflict, any meaningful peace. He has gone after Netanyahu. And at the same time, Netanyahu has rejected Biden's plan for Palestinian Authority control over Gaza after the war. So things are cooling between these two allies, Jason.
Yeah. I'll just say personally, as a Jew who has always been pretty supportive of Israel, I feel like this isn't about me, but I think there may be a lot of people listening who can relate to this. It's a very difficult in-between feeling right now, because I obviously support Israel's right to defend itself. And we even have, through Diana's side, family members who are in the IDF. So it is very close to us. I've been to Israel. And at the same time, when I watch what Netanyahu is doing and rejecting, I think, not only a very legitimate proposal by the Biden administration to say once the war is over, the Palestinian Authority would be in charge, but honestly, kind of the only tenable proposal, in my opinion, other than saying Israel is just going to completely occupy Gaza, which doesn't seem tenable to me. And so by doing that, especially right after the United States made the controversial, to say the least, decision to veto calls for a permanent ceasefire at the UN, as the lone vote, and therefore the veto on the Security Council, I think that's pretty audacious, and I think it's also wrong. And you and I have talked about this for a while, and I've taken a lot of heat from some folks. I'm not even on the left or right, just in the Jewish community, who really disagree with my saying that Netanyahu is not a good leader. Netanyahu Hamas is responsible for the attacks, but Netanyahu has some blame for certainly for leaving Israel vulnerable to it. And I just don't think he should be in charge there anymore. I don't think he should be prosecuting the war, and I don't think he's responsible enough or has the right temperament at all to think about how to proceed in the war and what to happen afterwards. And it's it's just really frustrating. And I think it's right for the Biden administration to talk about this change in government, because what they really mean but can't say is we need somebody other than Netanyahu in charge. And by the way, that's how the majority of Israelis feel. I would remind a lot of Americans who,
you're in company with the majority of people in Israel, and vast majority at this point. And it's a matter of when, not if, he's going to step down soon. And I think he's in this position now where he can't be trusted, because he has always pursued his narrow self-interest over the interests of his people or the Palestinians, obviously. And that has always been true, but it has now come to full light of day, and it is apparent to anybody watching, especially anybody who has to rely upon him for their safety. And there is no chance that this guy is going to see peace through. And I said this on the podcast yesterday. The U.S. now has offered a clearer plan post-war than Netanyahu has offered. They've said Palestinian Authority. They've also issued a series of requests and demands of the Palestinian Authority if they were to take over Gaza. And Netanyahu has rejected that. What he has not done is offer any alternative as to what the American plan is. And the assumption would be more occupation, which cannot be in the long-term interest of either the Israelis or the Palestinians.
As someone who has served in a country as an occupier, I can tell you that you don't win a lot of friends doing it. Now, Afghanistan was a lot different because the majority of the population wanted us there because we kicked out the Taliban. But that said, it doesn't take that many. Majority or not. I mean, I can remember this general coming in from Central Command, and I had to be his aide for a day, which was, of all the stuff that happened over there, interestingly, that was the worst because I just hated doing that so much. And I can remember this guy, he was a 1-star general, and it was one of the only days I got to be in an armored vehicle. And we are, as opposed to, being out there in just a thin-skinned Mitsubishi Pajero. And so we're cruising along in Kabul, and he sees this young boy look into our vehicle and make this throat slashing motion at us, which I saw regularly. And he said, what was that? And I said, well, sir, it means he wants to kill us. And he goes, well, that's not very nice. And I said, no, you're right, sir. It's not very nice. My point is, it's when you're removed from the situation pretty far, you can lose touch with the fact that when you, particularly with what Israel has done, agree with it or don't agree with it, doesn't matter. There's been an awful lot of bombing and an awful lot of killing, and nobody disputes the fact that the majority of those who have been killed have been innocent civilians. Doesn't mean they were killed purposefully, but that's the fact. The idea that you're then going to occupy that territory and think that it is going to be anything but a horrible, horrible, bloody insurgency against your troops is terrifically naive and a terrible idea. And I just don't see how there can be any argument otherwise. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders, who has never been viewed as somebody who is ride or die Israel, made an excellent argument when he said you can't call for a permanent ceasefire when Hamas is still intact and still dead set on killing as many Israelis as possible. You can't ask Israel to have a permanent ceasefire against people like that, but you can hope and pray for a cessation of hostilities long enough for them to talk and to have the hostages be released. And, that makes sense. I don't even know where I'm going with this other than,
no, yeah, I hear you.
Netanyahu's done a terrible job, and his idea of what you would do afterwards is going to be even worse.
Yeah, and he said something that was notable for those of you who follow the history, which is he said, we're not going to repeat the mistakes of Oslo. And I had a whole rant on this yesterday, which is what was the mistake of Oslo? The mistake of Oslo was letting Netanyahu take charge in the mid-90s. And that was it was the rise of Likud and the rise of Hamas, which are two very different phenomenon, but happened at the same time, and have become symbiotic. A lot of good reporting on this recently, that they are explicitly symbiotic. I used to use it almost as a metaphor or something, but it's actually explicitly true that Netanyahu had an interest in letting Hamas grow and prosper for reasons that we've talked about before. The way I look at this is, if you've ever had a friend who has a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction, they're still your friend. If they go to the hospital, you show up. If they need help paying for rehab, you pay for the rehab. If they just need somebody to talk to, you're there. But that doesn't mean you're not going to deliver the hard truths. And that doesn't mean that from time to time you're going to step in and issue ultimatums. And you're also not going to hand over money to your friend if you know they're going to use it for alcohol and drugs. And so in this case, that's the kind of friendship that I would want for the United States, which is, we're not going to sit by and watch you hang yourselves. We're not going to sit by and continue to support the illegal settlement expansion. We're not going to support an occupation without an end. We're not going to support young Israelis walking around above tunnels, Hamas tunnels, for years, if not decades on end. And we're not going to support, more indiscriminate, or indiscriminate is probably the wrong word, but just more killing of Palestinian civilians without a clear justification for how it's going to keep everybody safe, right? Like, what are we doing here? What is the end of this?
And those who are listening who have not heard us talk about this before need to understand that both you and I are deemed pro-Israel and receive a really substantial amount of flack from people who are not, including a lot of people who are on our side of the aisle. And so I equate.
To be clear, I have every bit, Jason, of continued skepticism towards a lot of the of my friends out there who say things like "from the river to the sea" and things like that. By the way, and none of this is in response to their pressure. This is just my reading of the event. Like, there was a great Wall Street Journal article recently that went to these protests where people are saying "from the river to the sea," and they asked them what river, what sea. Isaac talked about this yesterday, and they don't know what river and what sea they're talking about. People like, it's, that's not to say there are not astute pro-Palestinian people out there. I know plenty of them, but a lot of the people who are kind of trying to bully me into some kind of position out there don't know a whole lot about what's going on here.
I view my criticism of Netanyahu and my wanting a new leader for Israel to be no different whatsoever than my never voting for George W. Bush, wanting George W. Bush out of office, campaigning to see George W. Bush no longer in office, and at the same time joining the United States military and volunteering to go to Afghanistan. It is my view that there's nothing I could do that would be more pro-Israel than wanting to see a new leader in Israel, in the same way that I think that being a patriotic American involves not being for Donald Trump in the next election. I just don't see a difference. And anyway, so we promised some good news. Let's pivot off of this and deliver some good news for people.
Yes. Okay. So New York's highest court has invalidated the old district maps. So if people remember, in the last cycle, the legislature had drawn up maps that were very favorable to Democrats. The court struck those down. New maps were created that resulted in a 15-11 Democratic-Republican split. So there's 26 seats total. And if the original maps would have stood, Democrats would have won 22 of 26. So a net of 7. And so we can't know for sure that this ruling will result in a net of 7, but it certainly will dramatically increase the Democratic yield from the great state of New York and dramatically improve their chances of winning the House of Representatives. This is, I would say, good news in the short term. I continue to believe, as you do, that the best case scenario would be every state having nonpartisan redistricting committees, but you obviously can't unilaterally disarm, and we shouldn't.
Yeah, and in a world where you have gerrymandering and it's part of the system, well, then you have to at least get Democratic delegations out of the Democratic states so that you can eventually get to the point where you can create a system that's more just. So I totally agree. All right, with that, do you have a grab and or this week? Or you looked like you wanted to say something. So
no, I had an exciting thing to talk about for us.
All right, well, let's get to that. Go ahead, and we'll have a. And what I would say for a grab and or real quick though is I want to thank. I haven't had a chance to go through all of them, but a lot of people have gone to my website and used the contact form, and I've started to get a lot of emails about people nominating folks who are using their platform, and I really appreciate that. And I would just encourage people to continue to do that. You can go to jasonkander.com, use the contact form, and nominate somebody, and I'll get through them. And on a future episode, I'll try and pick out a few good ones for everybody to highlight some folks. But go ahead, one for us. Tell people what's going on.
Well, for once in my illustrious career as a Buffalo Bills fan, a fluke ending to a game went our way. And I texted you after the game. Like, I've gotten to the point now where I'm a Billy Bean in Moneyball. I love the Bills so much I can't watch the games. I literally created a to-do list of like 10 like annoying administrative items that I sat and did without looking at the game. And then, as if like almost like if you had a child who was like harmed halfway across the world and you just had this feeling, I knew something was going on, and I pick up my phone. It's the last minute of the game, and I'm staring at ESPN.com as like a baffling ending to this game occurred, in which you guys had this spectacular play called back by a very obviously offside Kadarius Toney, and your otherwise unflappable quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, embarrassed himself on TV, according to many commentators. He did.
Well, he has apologized. Yeah. He got very
which is great.
upset.
I don't pretend that he's a bad guy or anything like that. Everybody loses their cool, and I don't know. That's very frustrating. But it was great. We're alive. We have to win basically every game for the rest of the season, but at least we live to fight another day. One more week.
It is sad because it was probably the greatest single play ever to have not counted in a game. I mean, I'm not even going to describe it. People should go back and watch it. It was amazing. And other than that, I'm going to take a page out of your book, and it's too upsetting to me. I'm not even going to talk about it. I think I'm just going to pretend it didn't happen.
We own the Chiefs, parentheses, during the regular season.
In the regular season, yes. For those who don't know, one of the most famous playoff victories of the Chiefs, certainly over the Bills, but over anybody really by any team. Ravi and I were there together at Arrowhead a year ago. It was a year ago, right? Or it was 2 years ago.
Honestly, I think we need a name for me before and after that moment, because I don't feel like I'm the same person after that.
Yeah, you were mute after that moment. It was terrible. Yeah. But anyway, on a similar note, actually, painful. I am, as I told you before that we started the show, I am in terrific pain because I have the last couple of days I've had a lot of pain in my mouth, and I went to the dentist today, and he looked at it. He's like, everything is intact. He's like, have you had a sinus infection lately? And I was like, yeah, I did. I just got over it. He's like, you have an infection that has gone into your mouth, and now it's spreading across your teeth. So he gave me antibiotics. I picked them up right before we started broadcasting here. And I took a lot of Tylenol about an hour before we started, which is why I'm able to talk, but I can't chew. Everything I'm eating right now, I'm just making into shakes. And I bring this up, one, to complain and to just for people's sympathy, but really also because, I've always heard in the past about how, like in the olden days, the theory is that a lot of people who were in insane asylums and that kind of thing, is that a lot of it was attributable to the fact that dentistry was so primitive, and that people would be in pain from various dental maladies, and then they would try to fix it, but they really didn't know how. And just that pain in your mouth, dental pain, is so distracting and excruciating that it will drive you insane. And I was thinking of that this morning when, like, I just can't. This Tylenol is starting to work a little now, but it hurts like crazy. But like now I can concentrate a bit. I couldn't sleep last night, and I just want to say, like, anybody out there who's experienced a lot of dental pain, I feel for you, and I assume that these antibiotics are going to work, and in the next 24 hours, hopefully be past it. But I totally get how if you experience dental pain for more than a few weeks, how people would be like, that person has lost their mind, because I would lose their mind if this pain were to continue this way. So on that happy note,
it makes you wonder, like, what people did, like, before they were like proper dentists. Like, I guess they just pulled every tooth.
Yeah.
Until you had no teeth left.
I think they just went Castaway style, just boom, knock it right out of there. But the whole mouth. So, all right. On that happy note, and kind of thematically perfect after some of the things we talked about. Thanks everybody for listening. Ravi is on all your favorite socials at Ravi M. Gupta, and I'm at Jason Kander. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.